Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. It's opportunity. The path itself just presents to you this question of where to go. And it causes you to pause and think more deeply about the opportunities in life. As I approach that divergent path, it just strikes me with the question of left brain, right brain. When to be analytical, when to be out-of-the-box creative, to try and reach for something that has never been achieved previously. You grow up in New York in the decade of the 60s. It was the New York Yankees. Baseball was special. You know, and early in life, athletics seemed to be everything to me. I constantly had a ball in my hand, in my pocket, whether it a baseball, schoolyard, playing basketball, football, stickball, punchball. It was just one athletic event after another. This pace of life probably has its origins in my roots in New York City, growing up in an ethnic family, an Italian family that always had this high energy, high demand in a city that never sleeps. This pace has often been described as a New York minute. To me, it's been more like a New York second. How quickly can you achieve what needs to be achieved? The most precious commodity in life is time. It's finite. We can't create it, and we don't have control as to how much we have. And early in life, I came to realize how precious it is and the importance of getting on with doing what it is that you most want to get done.
He is incredibly productive and very focused on what he's trying to get done scientifically. He puts in very long hours. His life is work and family, and he's very, very extremely productive.
It's like a one-man orchestra in many cases, and the ability of keeping so many instruments in pitch, that is truly an inherent quality that he has. He is able to push many chips all at once at the right pace. It's a challenge to keep up in many cases.
My life has been influenced deeply by an early passing of my dad, so health has always been a significant part of my psyche. It is the fundamentals of diet and exercise, right? Of controlling that which you eat. It is trying to get my 10,000 steps in, and you may see me over at the field house getting my steps in while I'm reading reprints of scientific articles, but I'm going to get my steps in. Biking has been a big part of my life from the time when I was an adolescent in transporting myself around the city of New York. But it has been such a phenomenal way to not only physically exercise, but to psychologically and mentally escape the intensity of what we do at the desk, at the bench. It has just provided a diversity that has truly enriched my life. Bloomington, Indiana, and the university itself are really special. And I've often said, having been associated with this location for over half a century, right? 2/3 of my life, that, much like John Denver sang, I came home to a place I'd never been before when I came to graduate school. And I fell in love with the place, the arts, the topography, the people. They're just so embracing, as they say, Hoosier hospitality, it's real. I came to Indiana because there were two faculty members who had been co-authors of a textbook in biochemistry, and I had a particular interest in these macromolecules, large molecules, proteins, peptides. Those chemicals were capable of working miracles. The problem was, as I set off on my graduate work, we could not make these substances chemically. We were dependent on biological sources, extracting them from the glands of animals, pigs, cattle, in the case of insulin. And I always believed that if we could get control of the chemistry in making these substances, we could then use them pharmaceutically, and better yet, we could optimize them much as medicinal chemistry had optimized beta-lactams, antibiotics, penicillin to give us better antibiotics, vinca alkaloids to give us better oncolytics, chemotherapeutic drugs. And lo and behold, the good fortune is that the world was evolving as I was beginning my training, with Bruce Merrifield having invented this approach to making peptides on solid support, and right on the heels of that, using microorganisms to make these proteins, right? Insulin being a first. So I find myself in Bruce's lab learning the chemical skills, find myself as a first mover at Lilly in making that first hormone, human insulin, Humalog, and then being able to integrate the two to make things that don't exist in nature, to do things that nature is incapable of doing. And that is the roots of how we come to these phenomenal drugs for treating obesity that don't exist in nature, quite frankly. Metabolism has been a big part of my work. It's the biological side of the chemical work that I do, and I was introduced to it as I came to Lilly to work on human insulin. The chemistry was incredibly exciting because it was a first mover in showing that biotechnology could make biomedicines. You know, if not for that technology, which came to us nearly 50 years ago, we would be rationing insulin today. But I have to tell you, in the bigger medical realm, metabolism was looked as old school, backwater, and you would go to social circles and people would ask you what you work on, and they sort of hummed their way through it and wondered, why weren't you working on neurological diseases? Schizophrenia, Parkinson's disease, depression, cognition, right? Why weren't you working on cancer? Body weight, is that really a disease, right? But you know, the reason why we were experiencing this epidemic growth in the demand for insulin is because we were experiencing epidemic growth in body weight. Obesity had become a pandemic. And because we had defined it in the 80s and the 90s as being a psychological condition, you can't control your behavior, you can't control your appetite, there was little interest in developing drugs to treat this condition, which was at the root of this growth, not only in body weight, but also in type 2 diabetes, adult onset diabetes, hypertension, lipid abnormalities. And what we now come to realize with effective therapy, we can minimize the intensity, the prevalence of those co-diseases. So now all of a sudden, metabolism is on the front burner. And people are beginning to say, my gosh, control of metabolism and its central importance in health is neuroscience, is cancer, because we're decreasing the prevalence of these other conditions that have been accelerated or made worsened by poor metabolism.
Richard has the ability to see, even 15, 20 years ago, probably longer in this drug class, that these things had the potential. You look at the society of the Western world and the number of people that are diabetic and the incidence of that and the number of people that are obese in our country that are overweight and obese. It's astronomical. We're driving over a cliff from a public health standpoint. So Richard saw the need there, and he felt that these drugs had a potential for chipping away at that. And I think the success, of course, is really only partially realized so far.
He has this ability of being on top of every concept necessary for the development of a project. He has this ability of seeing the forest beyond the trees, right? Richard foresaw when the emerging data about the actions of incretin hormones in the control of metabolism, he foresaw its potential use as a medicine. And it's important to put this in a historical context, because this happened in the mid-90s. That is where he demonstrates that pioneering spirit. And then is the commitment to pursue that goal, I think, contributed to his success. It's one of those small examples that sets character, right? And makes people be very committed to work with him.
He is unique. I don't even think 1 in a million describes just how unique he is. So although he's obviously a chemist and a peptide chemist, arguably the best peptide chemist in the world. So is he super intelligent? Yes. Is he maybe the most intelligent person I've ever worked with? Yes. When he looks at clinical problems and then he understands how to create these new molecules, it's just uncanny. He has a sense for how to manipulate them just a little bit and get a little bit here, a little bit there, and just a really, really good sense of being able to innovate in ways that are not obvious, which of course is what any true unique invention is. A creative invention is something that's no one else really thought about. He's a big thinker.
This term of scientific colic is my respect and reverence for this field that has shaped my middle and later life. It is the acknowledgement of the power of what science can do in our life. You know, Lindbergh crossed the Atlantic in the late 20s, 1927, and 40 years later, we're on the moon. Think about that progression in aerospace over 40 years. I have lived that same advancement and more in the last 40 years as biotechnology came to us, and we have demonstrated what it has enabled in improving societal life, right? Medicine, longevity. These are things that have been propelled and supported by these advances in the molecular sciences, molecular biology. My love and my focus has always been on this inventive spirit, seeing things that people have not seen previously and advancing them to something of commercial, societal, public value. Science is not an athletic sport as much as I came from baseball and athletics. This is not a competition. And here I am in my 8th decade of life where I am as motivated and fulfilled by science as I ever was by athletics. It is an incredibly fulfilling and exciting environment. The people who get the benefit from these medicines and technology that will never know that it had anything to do with Indiana, will never know who were the people who made the discoveries, But God bless them. You know, it's so wonderful to know that exists, and before long they'll come to question, even criticize what we have provided, which provides the incentive to go and find something that's even better. It's been a phenomenal life, and that path, boy, I can't think of anything that might have been more fulfilling.